Hi there, I'm John and welcome to my YouTube channel, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm John from Nigeria, and on this channel I review books. I do the occasional singular book reviews, book tags, book hauls, everything bookish. You can find it here. And if you're a fan of essay length written reviews, I write for a Substack, a couple of dorks. I'll put it in the link below so you can check it out. If long form review content like written reviews are your thing, I really love doing it, and I would appreciate if more people checked out my written work. At the time of posting this, it's been about 20 days since my last video, which was the vlog, and I've missed doing this. I wanted to film for about 2 weeks now, but things have been so crazy. I think that's the best way to put it. Things have been so crazy, but it's September, it's the beginning of September, and so I have my August wrap up here. It's early, and the reason why there was no wrap up in July was because I only finished one book, which I will talk maybe a bit about here, but it was Universality by Natasha Brown. This is nominated for the Booker Prize this year, and I did not like her debut work, which I read last year and which everybody loved. And I read Universality, and I would say it's a step up from Assembly. It's like attempts to do a lot of things. Maybe I'll do a separate video dedicated to Universality, but I also plan to write on it, so you can watch out for that. But yes, in August I finished 5 books, and yeah, let's get into it. And if there are occasional noises, I apologize. You know, I live in a noisy area. But the first book I finished in August was I Remember by Joe Bernard, if that's how you say his last name. I started this, I think, the month before or so, but spilled over, and it is a memoir. It's a very unique memoir. It was released, I think it was released for the first time in the 70s, the first portion of the book, because it's about 3 different I Remembers compiled into this one edition, but the first book was released in the 70s. It's a very unique experimental memoir where every single sentence in this book begins with the word I remember, or rather begins with the prefix I remember. So that's what we are getting for over 100 pages, every single sentence beginning with I remember. But it kind of looks at Bernard like looking back at his childhood, at things he remembered from his childhood growing up in the 50s. I've forgotten where in America he grew up in, but we see him chronicling like specific things that he remembered in his childhood, but also things he was seeing in the present that were maybe no longer in season. I would say it's a very brilliant and unique look at memory, especially for when it was released, because there was nothing that had been released like this where every single sentence was starting with the same 2 words, I remember. And since then, a lot of people have gone to replicate like what Bernard said with this book. Even one of my favorite writers, Georges Perec, the French writer, has his own I remember. And so it was this way that Bernard decided to comb through his memories, but also, like, I would say, sort of analyze the memories of his life, and analyze in a way memory in of itself and what memory was, because it's these very specific memories that we get in I Remember that some of them just struck me so much, because it's how singular our memory is to each and every one of us. And so what you remember in your childhood and what you remember in your youth is very different from what I remember, especially being from a different place. And yes, but I think you get that specificity of the individual memory. But also, if you were born in America where Bernard was born, there's that collective memory of, let's say, things past. It's the way he chronicles like both cultural landmarks that are no longer there, but also events that maybe a group, a community might remember, or people of America might remember if you lived there, or if you live in America. And it's the way he taps into the personal, but he also taps into like the collective memory of, like, I would say America, but I cannot say America because it's not a general overview. But then I just found this like so brilliant, so unique, just a vision, because it's the kind of singular work you desire to encounter every now and then. And some of my favorite memories, like the first one I highlighted was on page 1, where it says, I remember my first cigarette. It was a Kent up on a hill in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with Ron Paget, who is Bernard's best friend. Like this one, I remember when I lived in Boston, reading all of Dostoevsky's novels, one right after the other, Or I remember when I worked in an antique junk shop and I sold everything cheaper than I was supposed to. I really adored this. I gave it 4 stars. It's one of the most singular works I've read this year so far. The next book I finished was The Gentleman's Guide to Getting Lucky by Mackenzie Lee. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I disliked it, but then I also found out after finishing it that it's like the in-between book between the first book and the second book, and it's a YA queer romance that I just found it silly and just silly. The next book I finished was Bonjour Tristesse by Francois Sagan, which, if you saw my vlog, this was the book I started at the beginning, and this was the only book I finished in that vlog. And also, this was the only women in translation book I read last month. Disappointed in myself, to say the least, that I did not do more women in translation works as I wanted to. Even the one I really wanted to read, I could not get to. But yeah, from the beginning of the vlog, I mentioned how there was this disconnect between me and the writing. And in Bonjour Tristesse, for recap, we follow Cecile. She's recounting this summer to us when she was 17, and she and her father, because her mother is dead, so her father is her only living parent, they go to this villa in, I think, France. They go to this villa for the summer holiday, and they initially go with the father's current, should I say, fling, right? But then this woman who was a friend of her dead mother and who is an acquaintance with her father is invited to come and stay over with them for this summer holiday, and she is a fashion designer and whatnot. And initially she has a good relationship with Cecile, who looks up to her, who admires her. But with the coming in of this woman, I think her name is Anne, but with Anne coming to stay with them for the summer holiday, the dynamics of the relationship between Cecile and her father, but also between them and their lifestyle, because they are very hedonistic and they just live freely. And even as young as Cecile is, the father lets her do what she wants, and it's beginning to seem like with Anne coming in, she is tending to kind of reform them, or she desires to reform them, and that her more toned down lifestyle is going to change the way they live, because it's getting to seem that she is falling more in love with the father and something is ensuing between them. And this kind of sends our narrator Cecile into this spiral, because she's such a young girl, and we get so many frustration in this book, and it's very evident in the voice that the narrator is very young. But also I learned that Francois Sagan was 18 when she wrote and published this, which is kind of a feat for an 18-year-old, because it's not a perfect work by any means. But at the end, something actually changed for me. There was just this sort of lingering quality the story achieved when it had moved, because it's a very short work, right? And yeah, I would say it's not like there are so many dramatic turns in the story, but then Cecile is just recounting, because at the beginning we do get this disclaimer that something that rocked her world and changed her life kind of took place in that summer. So it's just this slow build up till we get the final reveal of sorts. And yeah, I would say it's not something that punches you immediately, but by the end I do think that it leaves a kind of sinking feeling in your chest. And the next book I finished, I also showed in the vlog, was Passing by Nella Larsen. This is a classic, I would say. I don't know if it's a very beloved classic, but I knew I'd wanted to read it because it was a short classic and a friend of mine really liked it. And I'm not going to talk too much about this here because I want to do a separate video for it. But what I am going to say, aside what I've said in the previous video, is that this was my first 5-star read of 2025, or this is my first 5-star read of 2025, and the only one so far. And so do with that information what you will, but a separate review for Passing will come. I think this is a very brilliant book. And finally, because the light is going, I finished Dreamwork by Mary Oliver. This is a collection of poetry by renowned poet and essayist Mary Oliver. I had tried Oliver's essay collection Upstream, I think about 2 years ago, and it's a very beloved collection. I personally did not like it. I found the over fascination with Whitman and Emerson, and she writes a lot about nature. I found them interesting, but too concerned with the self, so much that there was nothing translated to me, the reader, who she was trying to tell about these very famous people who have inspired her. But I would say for Dreamwork, her poetry collection, I enjoyed this. It is sort of the same thing where she ruminates on nature, on her fascination with nature, both like big things, the littlest things, like the changes in nature, the changes in the season, the way some certain animals behave, like that's like the way the poems vary in the collection. Like it just moves from these nature topics, animal topics, and it's just highlights a woman very, very in love with the natural world, but also in love with life, all of life itself, like people, animals, and everything that contributes to life. And I think it was a beautiful thing, like to read about, to see rather, in this collection. And I would say this is the end of this video. I am a bit rusty. I don't know. This is why I try not to stay away from doing this for too long, because I just feel like I'm not doing enough when I return to it. But yeah, I enjoyed most of the works I read this month except that one. My next video will definitely not take so much time to come. It will be the passing review. But yes, if you like the video, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all the nice things, and please, most of all, comment. I love the interactions in the comments. So yeah, I will probably see you in the next one. Bye.